In this video, I'm going to explain exactly when the Asia kill zone starts and how you can trade inside it using a specific time window that consistently shows high probability liquidity sweeps. If you're someone who trades the Asian session or struggles to find clean setups during low volatility hours, this video will help you. So first of all, let me explain the time window you are going to trade in, because this part is very important. The time window we are going to focus on is only from 5:30 a.m. to 9:30 a.m. Indian Standard Time. This entire period is what we call the Asia kill zone. Now, I want to be very clear about something here. You do not need to wait until 9:30 a.m. to trade every single day. In most cases, you will be completely done with your trade by around 7 a.m. The model and setup that I am going to explain usually works in the first phase of the Asia kill zone, not the later part. Because of that, you will often get your entry very early, sometimes within the first 15 minutes of the Asia kill zone opening. So there is no need for you to sit in front of the charts for hours. If you get your setup early and you are targeting a reasonable risk to reward, your targets will usually be hit before 7 a.m. very comfortably. After that, continuing to trade does not really make much sense. That is why I generally recommend avoiding trades after 7 o'clock or 7:30 a.m., depending on your personal preference. Yes, the Asia kill zone technically lasts until 9:30 a.m., and if your trade is still running, you can hold it until then. But most of the time, if the setup is clean and the market is moving efficiently, there will be no need to wait or hold trades until 9:30 a.m. This approach keeps your trading very simple, very focused, and helps you avoid overtrading during low-quality hours. Now that the time window is clear, let's move on to the actual setup and model. So now let me explain how we are actually going to trade and what the main important characteristics of this setup or model are. This model is not going to be something completely different from what you already know. It follows the same core logic as our other models, but it is applied in a very specific way. The first and most important thing in our checklist is going to be a liquidity sweep. But this is not just any normal liquidity sweep. There is something more to this liquidity sweep, and I will explain that part in detail a little later. For now, I just want you to understand all the components we are going to use. After the liquidity sweep, the next thing we are going to look for is a market structure shift. This is our usual confirmation. Nothing new here. So the basic flow remains the same. First, we want liquidity to be taken. After that, we want a clear shift in market structure. Once we have the liquidity sweep and the market structure shift, the next thing we are going to use is a PD array. This PD array can be anything you are comfortable with. It can be a fair value gap, an inverse fair value gap, an order block, or any other PD array you normally use. However, there is one very important condition here. It is much better if the PD array is aligned with the direction of the market structure shift, and it is even better if that PD array is unfilled. Unfilled PD arrays give this setup much higher quality and much better reactions. Now, there is one very important rule in this model that I want you to clearly understand. For this setup, you do not need to wait for liquidity sweeps or confirmations to form during the actual trading session. Yes, you heard that right. You do not need to wait for all the confluences to happen during the Asia session itself. What I want instead is for you to identify these confluences before the session even opens. I want to see a liquidity sweep in the overnight price action. I want to see a market structure shift forming at that liquidity sweep during the overnight session. And if possible, I also want the unfilled PD array to already be present before the Asia session begins. This is very important because it allows you to come into the session with a clear plan and clear bias instead of reacting emotionally during the session. By the time the Asia kill zone opens, you already know what you are looking for and where you are looking for it. Now that you understand the logic behind this setup and the confluences we are going to use, let me show you some examples so you can clearly see how to apply all of this in a real trade. Now let me show you some real examples that help me plan my trades. As we are on the charts, the first thing we are going to do is wait for the market to open at 5:30 a.m. As soon as the time hits 5:30, the first thing we check is whether there is any liquidity resting on any time frame. In this example, you can see that we have a 15-minute sell-side liquidity sweep. Now, Before even going to the lower time frame, there are a couple of important things to notice. You can also see that we have a new week opening gap here. If you don't know what a new week opening gap is, you can watch our video on that topic to understand it better. Now let's move down to the lower time frame. Here you can clearly see that we already have a market structure shift forming. At the same time, you can also notice that we have an inverse fair value gap that is still unfilled, and it is perfectly aligned with the market structure shift. Both the market structure shift and the inverse fair value gap are forming at almost the exact same level, which gives us very clean confluence. Now the execution is simple. I place my order at that inverse fair value gap and wait for price to retrace back into it. Once price taps into the inverse fair value gap, the order gets activated. For the stop loss, I place it just below these recent lows to keep the trade properly protected. For targets, I can comfortably aim for the opposing side liquidity. Now let's see how price reacts. You can see how cleanly price moves into our target and how beautifully it respects the level, following the exact plan we had before the session even started. This is how preparing your bias and levels beforehand makes execution simple and stress-free. Let me show you some more examples so this becomes very clear. Once again, we are going to follow the exact same process. We are not changing anything. The first thing we do is mark out the last liquidity sweep before the session opens. This step stays the same every single time. As I mentioned earlier, the next thing we are going to use is a market structure shift as our second confluence. However, if you prefer, you can also use an alternative confirmation instead of a market structure shift. In this example, I am going to use an inverse fair value gap as my confirmation. So here you can see that we have a buy-side liquidity sweep, and after that, we mark out the inverse fair value gap. Both of these are formed before 5:30 a.m., which is exactly what we want for this model. Now that we have our PD array, or point of interest, we don't need to search for anything else. The main work is already done before the session even starts. If you feel that you need a lower time frame PD array for a more precise entry, you can absolutely do that. That option is always available. But for this example, I am going to keep it simple and show you how this works on the 5-minute time frame. Now we place our order at the inverse fair value gap. For the stop loss, we place it just above the highs to protect the trade properly. For targets, instead of randomly targeting a level, we look for unfilled order blocks. In this case, we also have a sell-side liquidity sweep before the market opens, which makes these order blocks very logical targets. These PD arrays are not only useful for entries, but they are also very effective for targeting. Now let's see how price reacts. You can see how cleanly price moves into our targets and how easily the trade plays out when everything is aligned beforehand. This is exactly why this process works so well. You already have your bias, your levels, and your plan before the session opens, and all you have to do during the session is execute. I hope these examples helped you clearly understand how this model works in real market conditions and how you can plan your trades before the session even opens. The whole idea is to keep things simple. You prepare your bias, you mark your levels, and you let the market come to you. You don't need to chase price during the session. You don't need to force trades. If the setup is there, you execute. If it's not, you stay patient. When liquidity, structure, and PD arrays are already aligned before the session starts, trading becomes much more calm and mechanical. If you found this video helpful, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. If you want to connect with me, you can join my Telegram and Discord. All the links are in the description. And if you want to learn personally from me, you can check out the mentorship program. The link is also in the description. I've also left discount codes for funded accounts down there if you're interested. That's it for this video. I'll see you in the next one.